Welcome to Critical Junction Episode 6. I'm Mark.
Oh, I'm Luke.
And joining us today is our friend Jill. So, hi, thanks for being here, Jill.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So today we're talking about free will. Is it an illusion, or is it something that gives life meaning? Personally, I'm going to go with the notion that it is, in fact, an illusion, just based on some, science-y shit and whatnot. I guess there are two schools of thought when it comes to free will. Either determinism, in that everything that we do, everything we think, is based on some prior cause, which results in the complete absence of free will. Or on the other side of that coin is indeterminism, where everything is completely random, which gives rise to free will. What do you guys think?
So we're establishing like our point of view first, and then
let's get that. Let's get that established, and then we'll go from there. So,
well, I don't know. I feel like just in hearing what you just had to say there, I feel like it's some sort of mix of both. I mean, to say that it's one extreme or the other, it's neither nor is.
So you're sitting on a fence kind of.
Well, I have to admit right away that where I'm coming from is very agnostic in terms of knowledge, not God, but just looking at what I know. I don't claim to know anything, so it's hard to, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure. Like, to me, I see no evidence that seems to point towards anything that says strictly it's this or it's strictly it's that in the moment. You know what I mean? In the open moment of right now kind of thing. I don't see, but everything's connected to something else in the past. So I don't see how. I don't even understand what you mean by free. Like nothing's free from anything else, really.
Yeah. Okay. I think I would probably have an opinion closer to yours than to complete kind of skepticism about free will. I think that there's room for talking about like materialist kind of determinism, while also having these kind of emergent type of phenomena like an idea of free will. I just don't think. Yeah, I don't think that there's a magical kind of free will. There's no sort of metaphysical idea of like a thing that doesn't have anything to do with the physical universe and the laws that govern it and stuff like that. I think everything that happens in the universe, of course, just arises because of the way the universe is set up and what's in the universe to begin with.
Mm-hmm. So the rules of the universe. We're going with science here.
That's it. That's
it.
So
there's nothing outside that.
But that being said, I don't think that I would say that we have no agency, or that we have no responsibility, or that we don't have any need to actually set goals for ourselves or answer for things that we do in a moral sense and things like that.
Well, I don't think that if free will is an illusion, that completely eliminates our responsibility and our what some might call choices vis-a-vis agency. If free will is an illusion, what does that really change? Like, does it eliminate responsibility for like murderers or whatever? I don't think it does, because we still live in a society where if we want to live peaceably together, we have to follow an established set of rules, regardless of whether or not free will is actually real or an illusion. Personally, I think it is an illusion, because any sufficiently complex system gives rise to things like the illusion of choice, the illusion of purpose, the illusion of free will. The universe being an infinitely complex system would necessarily mean that things like free will are illusionary, just based on if everything is deterministic. If we live in a completely deterministic universe where everything is caused by a previous cause and so on and so forth, then we can't possibly be free to choose from a set of things, because everything that we choose is based on prior knowledge, prior environmental settings, prior decisions that we've made.
Hold on. There's also an element of random. You're saying everything is chosen because of this and this, but there's also an element of random as well. Can there not be?
Yeah, well, that's the counter argument to it. Because there are elements of randomness in the universe. Things like quantum mechanics would tend to prove that. Like, particles simply come into existence for no apparent reason, and then they disappear.
I suppose they may not actually be random. We just don't understand them. That's what we're declaring with that there?
I think there are certain experiments that prove that randomness is an actual thing. There was one set up. This is let me just pull up the information here.
But what I mean is that it suggests that we just haven't recognized a pattern, and that's what randomness is. Does that make sense?
No. I think Mark, you're talking about actual randomness, like the thing about
Oh, it's actual. Oh, okay. No, never mind.
no, like the thing about the quantum physics, right? The you're talking about like the foam,
Yeah,
right?
the quantum foam, and
Yeah.
whatnot.
You're talking about the foam. Oh, the foam!
Well, okay.
You should have mentioned the foam.
So they conducted an experiment using entangled photons. So the experiment goes as follows: you generate a pair of entangled photons, which you can do this with a down converter, which splits one photon into an entangled pair of photons. Fire them at two polarizers, and randomly change the angle of the polarizers after the photons are emitted. So this prevents information about one measurement to affect the other, since that would require that information travels faster than light, which is impossible according to general relativity. So then you measure both photons, and do they go through the polarizers or not, and record the results. So by doing this, the photons either, hit one target or another, and that introduces complete randomness. So that destroys the determinism argument.
But it's also suggesting it's random because of the order of things, and because we're not understanding the order of things there. So that could be sort of some sort of pattern in time that we don't understand. Is that possible?
So you're saying that the
I'm saying
conclusions that are being drawn from the experiment are what's wrong, or what?
No.
They're kind of jumping to some kind of conclusion.
I suppose I'm always suggesting, that science is always based on a conclusion, and it's always trying to be hard, but things are actually soft. Like, it's our definition of things that have to be soft in a sense. You know what I mean? Like reality is hard, but we can only deal with softness in that sense. So
yeah, I like that. That actually kind of goes to some. Dan Dennett, right? The breaking the spell guy, the philosopher. His main thing is consciousness, and he also talks about free will, and he's got like he spoke about this use mention error with regards to terminology and the kind of the labels we put on things, or the words that we use to describe things. Often people end up talking past each other because they'll use a word in a completely different way. One person is using the word just like mentioning the concept, and the other person is actually trying to employ the concept in their language.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm expressing that distinction very well or explaining it, but I think that kind of speaks to this like error that people make in terms of in terms of like projecting hardness or softness onto a problem. It's like another thing that Dan Dennett was talking about was this. He brought up this book about magic that his friend was writing. And when his friend would tell people that he's writing a book about magic, the people would ask him, like, are you writing a book about real magic or about fake magic, like the kind of magic that, involves people doing tricks and tricking you into things and
illusions,
illusions or whatever. Yeah. And so the guy goes, no, I'm talking about actual like street performers in India who are performing magic on the street. And they're like, oh no, okay, so you're talking about fake magic. And so he says, in other words, the real magic is the magic that's fake, that doesn't exist, and the fake magic is the one that is actually practical, that we can actually do.
Right.
That's funny. But I think labels become increasingly more important whenever we're delving into topics that are necessarily more obscure, and I think free will is one of those. Like if you remove the word free from the term free will, what does that leave us with? And is that
would will suggest some sort of aim, like a will to something, like an aim to something?
I guess it suggests like a desire, a spontaneous desire that comes from some kind of authentic self or something that's not
Authentic self.
Or that, no, sorry, I didn't want to go there. I just mean that's not determined by some other outside factor.
Okay, so you mentioned spontaneity, right? So would you consider spontaneity to be kind of an intrinsic element of free will? Like, if you remove the element of spontaneity, is free will still free will?
Huh.
Or is spontaneity essential to free will, in other words?
Well, we haven't really. Yeah, I mean,
Now I'm wondering if I'm making a mistake with the word spontaneity, because I'm kind of imposing ideas of randomness on spontaneity.
Well, I think that's important. It's important for the argument. So let's keep the term spontaneity for the time being, and let's try to incorporate that into the argument that you're trying to make. So, like, is spontaneity a key element of free will?
What do we mean by spontaneity? Spontaneity, we're talking about the pre-noticing of something, not noticing it in advance, and it seeming spontaneous. I mean, we don't know if it would be spontaneous or actually just seem spontaneous. So we're just talking about our perception of something, right? Am I wrong?
Yeah.
Like, when we're talking about free will, we're just talking about looking at something and whether we can determine it to be free in that moment. Like, what I mean is, we can only speak of free will in terms of our trappedness in time. Does that make sense? Like, if we were able to see into the future, there would be no difference. Like, it would be predetermined and possibly free. Like, it could be both if we were looking at things from the future. Does that make sense?
Just based on what I've been researching, I can accept a lot of what you're saying. So I think it is a combination of determinism versus indeterminism or uncertainty, just because of the fact that we live in a mix of both of those universes. Like, the universe is mostly deterministic in that, everything from the onset of the Big Bang up until now has been according to a preset set of conditions. But when you introduce like quantum randomness into the equation, then things get all fucked up and weird, right? So, but is that a defense of free will just because there is an element of randomness to the universe and it's not completely deterministic? Like, the uncertainty principle relates specifically to photons and particles. As far as I know, we're not photons and particles. Like, we're composed of that.
Well, it doesn't mean it's not relative. We're giving an example of
Right.
a possibility here, using an example, like a symbolic representation kind of thing. So,
right. But to my point, I don't think it's necessarily true that just because quantum particles spontaneously come into existence, that automatically means free will is a thing.
No, exactly. And also, I wouldn't want to exaggerate the importance of that example of randomness to suggest that randomness whole scale is something that's like in equal measure to the deterministic factors influencing our free will or things like that. Like maybe the randomness in the universe is limited to something like those specific cases of quantum mechanic particles coming into being.
And if that's the case, then I would say free will is definitely an illusion. Like, because if we take the definition that free will is the conscious decisions that we make, or conscious decisions we come to, consciousness influencing whatever we're choosing to do, apparently freely, then that can't be right, because everything that we think we are free to choose is based on, like I said before, a combination of nature versus nurture and a whole bunch of different elements that we are not conscious of whenever we're making decisions. Like, the classic experiment was they hooked up a bunch of people to either an fMRI or some other device, and they were given apparently free choice as to when to push a button. But they mapped out the fact that neural activity was occurring seconds before they consciously made the decision to press that button and stop the timer. So they are clearly not the conscious authors of their choices.
But that doesn't necessarily suggest that. That just suggests that there's an activity beforehand. Just suggests that.
Yeah, that's exactly what that suggests. But if, again, we're taking the definition of free will as the conscious authorship of choice, then we cannot be free to choose, because the brain is making those decisions.
Hold on, no. Just because we're not conscious of it doesn't mean we're also not doing it. Does that make sense? You're talking about consciousness of consciousness.
Right, yeah.
Am I wrong?
It's awareness of, like...
Yeah, that's right. Awareness of a conscious decision. But I think I know what you're saying. You're saying that the subconscious is a real
am I
thing.
saying?
I think you're saying that the subconscious is a real thing, and that can also be a spontaneous or at least an autonomous kind of thing that's not determined.
But if the subconscious is making those choices, how can you, by definition, say that you were free to make that choice?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so let's talk about then, if this were the case, what of guilt of action and then moral
responsibility, moral
yeah,
accountability.
So that does disappear in that sense, in the sense that it all led, like if I'm convicted of a crime and they go, so why did you do that? I would be like, well, you see,
because of my genes and my environment.
Go back right from I popped as a cesarean baby, you see, and blah, 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 and tell the story of my life, and that's why I did it, at the end of my story of me kind of thing.
Well, right now, I think the evidence points in that direction. So, in terms of responsibility, that becomes a societal problem. It becomes an issue of, we have, established morality, and we have established sets of guidelines within which we're supposed to operate in order for society to become or
you
continue to
say
be functional.
Established as if it's a solid thing, but it's not a solid thing. It is,
Laws are a solid thing.
But when we're talking about ethics,
Right.
No, it's not a solid thing. Like, if we're talking about our view of reality, it seems solid at the time, and we base decisions, or we seem to be. I don't know where I'm going now with this, but when it comes to ethics, it's not solid. You're saying we have solid laws? No, we don't. We have. I mean, in terms of moral laws.
Okay, well, yeah, in terms of moral laws, no, I agree with that. Like morality is relativistic by nature, right? But I think if we're going...
That's a little hasty, isn't it?
No, he's decided.
I have decided.
I'm pretty sure the debate is still raging on that one.
No, it is not.
Can't just declare
I made a declaration.
Right here!
Right here. As of right now, that is true. But, if we were to accept that scientific interpretation of the illusion of free will, then as a society, I think we would have to tread carefully and not be too, I guess, relativistic in terms of setting up new laws that would take that into consideration. You know what I mean? Like, if society were to just wake up tomorrow and acknowledge that free will is an illusion, right? We're completely determined based on all these other, conditions, and therefore mass murderers are no longer morally responsible for their actions. It's all their genetics and all their environment that caused them to commit these acts. How do you think we would adjust to that kind of
thing? You could reasonably justify the fiction of moral responsibility. You could say that it's useful for us to set up a system in which we try to get you to circumvent your moral intuition and in turn your will, your original will. We can say that it's justified to try and get you to counter that,
to aim you in another direction.
Aim you in another direction.
Can I say that? I'm coming back to aim.
So that society functions properly, and so if free will means that your motivations and your autonomous impulses are to go one way, while external factors can come along and influence you to do otherwise than what your nature would have you do, then that's kind of going around free will, and in some sense, I think the problem is still there, because you're counting on the fact that there's something in the person's nature that'll cause him himself to have his autonomous motivation to go against his original autonomous motivation. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, we're suggesting that he's still in the same motivation.
Am I being like way too kind of vague here?
No,
it is pretty abstract.
It's but no, I think we're on the right track with that thought. But would it become recursive, like you're suggesting? Like, would it come back to the fact that this person's nature is so fundamentally what we might consider to be flawed that they would, prevent that solution from taking place because it's in their nature not to seek that out?
Yeah, and in those cases, those are like the kind of people that we imprison for life sentences without possibility of parole, kind of thing. Or if you're into the death penalty, then you get rid of them that way. Because if you can determine for a fact that this person will never be amenable to overcoming his nature. In order to have moral actions that are more in line with what we collectively, kind of by the social contract, determined to be the optimal way of interacting or of acting.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, is the social contract. Like, even if free will is an illusion, we do still have that social contract that it's wrong to kill someone else, and I don't think that would go away if free will is in fact an illusion. Like that's still the pursuit of happiness and the pursuit of one's dreams will always still be a thing, a prime driving factor behind, I guess, most people's lives, because it's, even though it's ingrained based on that whole nature nurture thing that we were talking about, it's still a driving factor and still something people would be willing to pursue. Like, if someone still wants to create art or whatever, they'll still do it regardless of whether or not they're free to do so, and it'll still bring them happiness because that's what their person is kind of determined to be like. Would you agree or disagree with
that? I need more.
Need more?
Yeah, feed us more. I'm not sure. To me, it doesn't seem, for me, it doesn't feel like an either or thing. Do you agree? I'm like, well, I don't know. I need more information here.
Yeah.
Like I'm not sure I understand, I guess, really.
But I don't fully understand it either. But right at the moment, I'm more tempted to lean toward free will being illusionary. It's just based on everything that we were just discussing already.
One thing I wonder, going back to this idea of labels and errors and that kind of thing, I wonder if calling it an illusion is itself an error, or at least might introduce some unnecessary problems to the situation. By calling it an illusion, we're sort of disavowing its reality for us, when in fact the illusion is a reality to some extent, right?
What is that reality to us? Like, why is the, for the sake of argument, illusion of free will so important to people?
Well, first of all, there's this idea of morality and being able to.
It's usually the reason it comes up.
To put like blame or praise on people for their actions, and to be able to hold someone accountable for them, and in a way that allows us to maybe
control it and stop it, in a sense. No, does that make sense?
Right.
Prevent it from happening
in a way that justifies our imposing a steering of people's and aiming of people's actions, or yeah. I think by calling it an illusion, we're too much kind of discounting it, and I think that obscures the reality part of the illusion. Like
so rather than free will is an illusion, what would you call it? Well, how would you describe the argument against the existence of free will?
So I would say that free will is probably
You're starting off sure. You're sounding sure.
No. I'm not sure about any of this stuff. But I would say that this thing that we call free will, it's like a structure that we've built, okay, that is useful to us, and it has an effect on how we live our lives, and
so a thinking tool kind of thing.
Yeah, like a thinking tool. Yeah.
Okay. To do what? To do.
No,
to make
I'm
choices?
Just thinking just like any kind of abstract concept that's real, but that's not like
tangible.
You know what I mean? Like when you're talking about like the law, let's say, like the actual law. Not the actual law. I mean the justice system.
Right. Okay.
This is this is sort of an abstract concept that we've constructed that serves a purpose, and everybody can learn about it and can use it and apply it in practical ways, even though it's not something like this table here.
Mhm.
And I think maybe free will is something like that, rather than being something that doesn't actually exist, or that or that can be kind of dismissed as being illusory. It's something real that we can use and that has an effect. Maybe.
Can I say something? So, like, free from what? The will free will free. What? Like,
yeah.
Can we just find free? Like, what do we mean exactly by free? Like, it's not free from our past self. Like,
Well, I think that's the argument that supporters of free will try to make, is that, yeah, it is free from the self. Our choices are based on absolute freedom to choose from any amount of different options. It's free from that kind of shackling of upbringing, nature, genetics. Like, our ability to choose is not based on any of those factors, is what people who argue for free will would suggest.
God, that seems so crazy to me. Like,
Yeah,
how is that
actually, I
possible,
don't even
you know?
see that as being like remotely reasonable.
Well,
I
unless
think-
you were
I think-
some sort of like practiced meditator that could control the direction of their mind, you know what I mean, and just really, I don't know, ride that wild pony real nice, you know? I don't know, like, it seems crazy.
Yeah,
We're always connected to our
I think
past
there
and
can be
all sorts of things.
there could be like a more reasonable free will supporter that does acknowledge that these other factors, like your upbringing and your chemical makeup and all that, has an effect, but that your free will is like that magical part of yourself that can kind of circumvent this stuff, or that
So
can
transcend
ignore
it and make
it,
some
that transcends it.
and
Yeah,
make some
I
other
guess.
choice kind of thing, you know, and be
Yeah.
open to either or.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, if consciousness is purely, for the sake of argument, neural activity as a result of, biological impulses in the brain, what part of the brain can therefore transcend its own makeup in order to make those free choices? How is that possible?
Yeah, I don't think it is.
No, I don't think it is either.
No,
I don't know. I mean-
I think that's ridiculous, but I think that in itself is not as ridiculous as this idea of a free will person who doesn't think that any of the real factors in the universe have any influence on our wills, our motivations. Yeah, I just don't think there's that many of those kind of free will supporters out there. But either one of them I disagree with, I suppose.
So what is your position then? What would you? Yeah, what's your position on the idea of free will? Do we have it? Do we not?
So I think we have something that we call free will that allows us to also have moral code or just morality and ethics. I think it's just that my idea of free will is something that can kind of surface or out of it can kind of surface out of the physical properties of the universe, even though it's not necessarily just a direct kind of description of those processes.
It sounds like you're almost saying that we can't define things properly enough to say that that's a thing that can be coded with those words almost.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me.
Like we can't represent reality with language, or it would take a hell of a long time. I don't know.
No, I think that's a pretty apt description. Like, the universe is so complex that categorizing it into language becomes increasingly more difficult the more we understand about it. Which is, I think, why science is such an important tool, because it allows us to grasp more abstract concepts in a different language than a spoken language. It gives us mathematics, which allows us to represent more complex ideas in a different way. And I think this is going off on a different kind of tangent, but if we teach children from a younger age that math is a language, I think we would have a lot less people who are glibly unaware of how to do things like calculate a percentage tip at a restaurant or whatever. Like science and science literacy and mathematics are extremely important in order to gain a better understanding of the fundamental realities behind the processes that make our universe work. And I think
at the same time, I think to have too much of a focus just on a scientific perspective can sometimes kind of blind you to less hard problems or less hard kind of concepts.
Like what?
Well, I don't know. I hear people like Lawrence Krauss talking about philosophical things, and sometimes I think he's kind of missing the mark, or he's discounting a more kind of open perspective on some of these problems. To bring it back to free will and this idea of just calling it an illusion versus calling it like an emergent construct. I think that's a distinction whose importance can maybe be ignored by the purely scientific perspective.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm taking the position of the purely scientific, while recognizing the importance of what I'm going to call the illusion, but in your case, calling it the emergence of how did you phrase it?
How did I phrase it? Like an emergent construct?
An emergent construct. Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it, because free will, despite the fact that it may be complete bullshit, has its place in our society, I think, because, like you said, it gives rise to things like moral responsibility. But on the flip side of that, let's briefly touch on morality and
whether it actually does require.
Right. Does morality require free will, or does free will necessitate moral dilemmas?
Does free will entail moral dilemmas?
Yeah. Because if we were free to make those choices,
then we're free to make the wrong ones.
Yeah, and does that give rise to the concept of evil?
Well, the whole idea of right and wrong even is an issue. Like, those are decided decisions that are usually pre-made before us, not by us, and imposed upon us, and therefore we're not free from them. Like, they're concepts in and of themselves that we're hanging on to, kind of thing.
So, like, when you think about other sentient animals, right? These are things that have brains, and to some extent they must have a kind of mind, right? Because they have to model their environment to be able to hunt or, survive, right? But at the same time, nobody says that animals have free will.
Yeah, is it true that only human, is that the general consensus, is that humans have free will and animals don't? I don't think so. Is that not what that's?
What is it about the human mind and about humans that
what makes us so special?
Is it the consciousness of consciousness kind of thing? Like being conscious of consciousness?
What?
Is it the being conscious of consciousness? It brings...
Oh, the being conscious of consciousness. Oh, maybe, yeah, okay.
When we're thinking of free will, I always imagine...
That's actually what I was wondering. Like, what are people thinking about when they say, no, humans are totally different from animals?
I think that's what it is. I think we're thinking of thinking. Is that not what it is? We're thinking that we think and nothing else thinks, or something like that. Everything's on autopilot.
Do we know that all animals don't think about thinking? Is it just that we don't know how to communicate?
We don't know that. A lot of animals have some degree of consciousness to them, albeit not to the same extent as humans, but most animals do have a certain degree of consciousness.
I'm pretty sure I've seen an animal sulk before. And to sulk, that it seems to me it demands something a little bit more than autonomic responses
Exactly.
to your environment. That's like some kind of there's an idea of reflection in there.
Some kind of self-reflection. And like elephants are capable of painting self-portraits, for example, right?
Oh yeah.
Some of them have. It's kind of cool. But yeah, like that does raise the question of what makes us so special to think that we alone would have the agency of free will. I think it just backs up the point that I was making earlier, in that we don't. Mm-hmm. We are just animals. Or on the flip side, maybe every animal has free will. I don't think there's been enough study into this field to claim one truth over another yet.
So what would be the difference?
Because as it stands now, we assign moral value to the actions of humans, and we deny.
So it's kind of like saying only in retrospect would there be a difference? Like it's the looking upon it that's the difference?
Well, no, I think if all animals have free will, then that might impose some form of morality on the animal kingdom in that case, because then the lion had the choice to hunt down the gazelle. They made a conscious free will based decision to hunt down their prey.
Right.
And that would therefore, if we accept that morality is, let's say, a byproduct of humanly defined free will, then that causes problems along that path. I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know where I'm going with that.
Well, so are we? So are we just assuming now again that one requires the other? That free will requires morality, or morality requires free will?
I don't know.
Are we just making?
Let's talk about that.
An assumption.
We're probably making an assumption, but let's talk about it. What do you think? I personally have no idea.
I don't know. This whole thing's over my head, kind of. Not that I can't follow it or anything, but that I can't make a decision, yay or nay, on this. Like that's not, that's not what I was made for. It's like deciding, is God real? Yes or no. Decide now.
Well, that's another episode. We're bringing that
up without making decisions, yay or nay, which like I can't do that either. But I think we can still talk about what our intuitions are, and then we can talk about after that whether there are reasons for it that are reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we're justified
are reasonable.
Whether we're justified in our intuitions or not. Like we can maybe disprove our intuitions, right? So my intuition is that I want to say that I don't want those to be linked. I don't want the two of the two of those things to have to depend on each other.
Which two things? Which two things are you talking about?
Free will and morality.
Okay.
Yeah, because this is the assumption that seems to always arise out of this conversation. It seems like the reason why people always want to say that free will exists is because they want to have morality.
Right.
Because morality is the only way they can
right, and it assumes
feel secure in their lives.
So it's the feeling of security. It's assuming that morality wouldn't exist if you didn't think of morality, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Which may not actually be the case.
If you didn't think of morality, what?
Yeah. Well, it's assuming that morality wouldn't exist unless we were conscious of morality.
A lot of people who think free will is real, don't think that we thought up morality. Most of them, I think that morality is something that exists and was imposed by God.
Yeah, right? I think you're right. A lot of them would see morality as being an absolute, being something that's been imposed on them by, like you said, some kind of God or some kind of.
I wonder, is that kind of a paradox?
Well, which isn't the case, though, right? It's just not the case.
Of course not. No, the morality is not an external thing that exists unto itself that people obey. Morality is something that we as a society have come to agree on as being important factors to our survival as a collective.
Yeah. I don't even know that we necessarily need to agree on them if we think of a more kind of like natural selection, evolutionary view of it.
Absolutely.
It's just what has to be in effect for us to continue functioning.
Yeah, what will survive?
Right. So in that sense, it just again it emerges, right?
Do you think altruism is natural to biological species, like different primates or whatever?
I think it can be, because not all species are geared towards this super simple equation of I'm born, I reproduce, and I die. Some species, there's really only a very small fraction of them that actually do the work of reproducing.
Mhm.
The rest of them are doing the other things of like gathering food or things. I think most ants aren't necessarily involved in reproduction with the queen, right?
Right.
So
I would be, though, if I were the ant. If I were an ant, I would
in that sense, I mean, I guess. So we can't talk about animals in moral terms, but you could say that that's a kind of altruism, right? Whatever that ant is doing throughout its life cycle is kind of altruistic, because it's not about it. It's not about it kind of advancing its own genetic line or whatever, right? It's just helping the colony.
Right.
Well, it may have a different view of what it is, and it may
doesn't
not
have-
see
it
itself.
doesn't
as-
have a view. It's an ant.
It doesn't have to have a view.
It's an ant. It doesn't know.
Okay, well, could we then link altruism to consciousness? And so the more conscious a person, the more depth of consciousness, then the more possibility of the emergence of altruism?
I think that's an important point to make, because like just based on observation, the tendency seems to be that the more conscious a species is, the more tendency it would have towards altruism. Like humans, for example, top of the food chain, we're inherently altruistic by nature. At least some of us are. If you discount the few bad apples to ruin the bunch, our tendency is to want to help others. We don't like to see other people suffer. Again, I'm speaking in generalities, but
Yeah, well, I know our consciousness or our ideas are to certainly think we are. I don't know if it's actually true or not. I think we like to think that we're good and going somewhere and aiming ourselves into a good, but I don't think we really know what that is. I don't think we do have much. Our consciousness is not very sophisticated. We're not very smart.
we're not.
We're really dumb
mean,
about how smart we are.
And I think that backs up the anti-free will argument, is that we think we're super conscious of a bunch of different things, but we're not. Like, our brains kind of suck in a way. All of it. Our brains process so much information, but only a tiny fraction of it enters into our direct consciousness. Everything else is happening in the background.
Right, but there you're talking about awareness of awareness kind of thing. We could be functioning in a self-organizing automatic way, all these decisions, this mosaic of decisions that are made, and then we realize only 1% of that decision that was made, and we think that we made that choice. And maybe in that sense we did make that choice, but there's a million other choices that we didn't make, and so it's not actually free from any of those other choices.
And that's exactly the argument that I was making. That's the argument against free will that a lot of people like Sam Harris make. That exact argument is why they say free will cannot be a thing, because of most of your choices are being made unconsciously through the multitude of different information or data points that you've collected without becoming aware of them.
I suppose it doesn't discount the idea that it could be possible in some sort of a transcendent way, as in if your mind could transcend
how can
itself.
It though? How could a biological organism transcend its own makeup?
Not its own makeup, but its own concept of itself.
But there's no evidence to support the idea that consciousness exists outside of the brain.
No, but you can have this idea of something being more than the sum of its parts, right?
Sure.
Like a language is more than just sounds and marks of ink on a page, right? There's something more.
Right, it's not separate from other things. It's
not
in combination.
It's not separate from those things, but it's more than just squawks and scribbles, right?
What is it then? What more is there to language than it being different vibrations or pictorial representations?
Well, because you've got scribbles and sounds that we can't use that aren't useful to us in that way, but we've organized a specific set of sounds and scribbles in a way that helps a community to kind of share things, or that can be useful to all of us, right? I just think that idea of, like, I look at either of you, you guys are people, that have a character, and there's a whole, like, beingness about you that's more than just a bunch of skin and bones. And
Like it can be infinitely described, and you could just keep on going, sort of thing.
I don't know about infinitely described, because there's discreteness to you guys, right? Like there's something that's you, and there's something that's you.
Like
but we're all made of exactly the same physical stuff.
Okay, so you're saying language looks like this physical stuff, but it's more than that?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right. It's also the capturing of everything that can be expressed with it, and the continuation of it. It's ever evolving. Like, it's not as if language is one lockdown thing. It continues to evolve and change, and words keep on being added. So it's something else first, and then becomes that?
Yeah.
How did we originally get on this metaphor?
I'm not sure.
We started with something about
something with the brain, I think, is where we started going off on the language tangent. I don't remember.
Oh, sorry. I threw us off, and now I've disconnected from the original reason why I wanted to bring up this analogy.
I think that's another reason why our brains suck.
Yeah.
Well, they may not suck. We may just not be using them for the right thing or something like that, or, you know what I mean? I don't know. Like, my brain sucks for math,
Oh, okay.
It may not suck for other things.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't think that's necessarily true. Like, the I can't math argument, I thought I couldn't math for the longest time, but it's the way, it's like like a language, like we were just talking about. It's something to be learned.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't know that language.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not very good at that language when I speak that language, sort of thing.
Yeah, but like a language, it comes with practice and it comes with doing.
Okay, well, how about my inclination is not strong in that language, sort of thing. I think that some minds would be naturally more inclined to speak that language, sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of different brains are more inclined to certain things than others. Like yourself, when it comes to mathematics, you're not so inclined towards it. But it is something that everyone can potentially grasp. Some might be better at it than others, but I think it's within everyone's grasp to pick it up.
Yeah. Why would that be the case? If there can be differences in degree for the amount of aptitude somebody has for one thing compared to another person, then why couldn't there also be someone who has no aptitude
towards that, and because they have an aptitude towards some other thing?
Yeah.
So they may have absolutely no inclination towards math.
Sure, I think that's possible.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, some people could just be leaning towards the very low probability of being inclined to a certain thing, which would make them, A, not want to do it, and B, if they do it, they would probably suck at it because they're just not into it, or they're not inclined toward it, or their makeup isn't congruent to them being...
Yeah, so doesn't that mean that some people can't math?
Sure, maybe.
Yeah.
But maybe they can math to a very lesser
very small degree. Yeah,
right. They can
that looks
they can
very
add
much
1
like
plus 1.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. Let's go with that.
Okay.
Probability. So, does free will exist? Is it an illusion? I don't think we're anywhere near to solving this question that's been debated on for thousands of years, but it's certainly been an enlightening discussion today, I think.
Well, I really like that idea of the language being used. This was something you were bringing up, sort of thing, and that even just the idea of free will, like, we really have to reduce it and define each one. What's free and what's will? Like, what are we talking about exactly? Is it free from some things and not free from other things?
Yeah, like I wonder if we can, if it's just a question of people coming up with specific enough or explicit enough definitions for their use of those terms, so that we could kind of bring together our own definitions and then come up with some kind of a consensus on it. And then you, in that way, you could sort of like on the social contract kind of idea. Just say, we choose to say that we have free will, but it means this now.
Right.
And then there's a list of things that it means. Kind of thing.
So if all three of us right now we're putting that list together, let's start naming a couple of items that we think might belong on this is the new definition of free will list.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Okay, well, would the possibility of spontaneity be on that list? The possibility of randomness? Like that direction is neither this nor that, but could be an actual choice in the moment, like... Like, I don't know. I keep on having this vision of, when we're talking about free will, I keep on picturing birds and how they fly together in patterns. And I always think, and I'm thinking to myself, if we were to ask one bird, was it choosing to turn with the other birds? It wouldn't be conscious of it. Yet it's doing it. Is it a choice? So we're talking about free will, choice.
I mean, and there's another way of looking at free will too. Like the freedom part doesn't mean, or maybe doesn't mean being able to come up with an idea and will your will, right? It could be just the free part means that you're able to discount the influences that would keep you from doing what your determined will is, what your determination
you're
is.
Talking about the inability to escape that. Does that make sense? Like, you're saying it's not free because we can't escape these other factors.
Right.
It's not free.
Yeah.
So, is it possible to escape? Becomes the question. Like, we could phrase it that way.
Yeah. And
to make a free choice.
I think so. I think that's what I think that might be what, like, consciousness is for, maybe. Consciousness is for this thing called reason, which allows us to acknowledge what our will is and acknowledge what what's directing us to do otherwise, or acknowledge the fact that we might be being directed to do something other than our will, which is also directed, I guess, by something else.
That's very similar to an argument that Dan Dennett was trying to make in support of free will, saying that because we're conscious, we have the ability to kind of evaluate potential outcomes in the future and act according to them in order to avoid a certain outcome from taking place, like a brick being thrown at your head. Right? If you did not have that capability of evaluating the impact it would have, no pun intended, then there goes your free will. But just because you're able to make that determination or that prediction, you can duck out of the way, making a seemingly conscious choice to avoid getting hit in the head with a brick. So that gives rise to free will being a thing. So that might be.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's exactly where I am on the free will thing.
Right.
I'm that kind of free will. I'm not the magical free will. So I don't think I've budged since the beginning of this conversation.
Neither of us have thought anything new here.
Yeah, I've learned nothing.
I think I'm pretty much on the same wavelength as you are, Jill, when it comes to free will. But I think I also tend more to accept that a lot of it is deterministic, and in a lot of cases we don't have the ability to choose a different outcome. But at the same time, within a limited range of possibilities, we do, which in that case might be the new definition of free will: the ability to make a conscious choice within a certain set of probabilities.
That aren't free.
That aren't necessary. Well, yeah.
So we're talking about freedom within not freedom.
Freedom within a range.
Yeah.
I think.
In the spectrum,
which kind of reminds me of like these artists that say that they do their best work when they're completely constrained in the media or the materials they have to work, or even musicians who have to work specifically within a genre, like maybe a jingle writer for a commercial. They're given very narrow parameters for the kind of music that they can make, and yet that kind of narrowing of the where they can go, their choices. I've heard these people kind of report that this is like a majorly freeing kind of thing because it gets them to have all kinds of ideas about what to do with this.
Okay. Explosions of uniqueness, like ideas, brand new ideas.
So that's basically what we were just talking about, which is this idea of constraints being a cause of freedom.
Well, it's funny when you talk about constraints and let's say making a piece of art, it's usually dealing with those constraints but deviating from them ever so slightly in a palatable way that makes art even noticeable in a sense. So it's both taking the rules and also breaking the rules that's important.
Yeah, but I guess then it becomes an issue of like you're given a set of rules to break.
Yeah.
So you're only breaking those rules.
Right. Well, you could be breaking other rules. It depends on how you're looking at it and where you're coming from.
This is all way too abstract now.
I think we're delving into the realm of the extremely abstract. So I think now
and that's why circles and squares really love each other.
Oh, not this again!
Not this! Damn it, Luke! Well, okay, yeah, I think this would be a good place to wrap it up. This has been Critical Junction episode 6. I'm Mark.
I'm Luke.
And thank you, Jill, for being here. It's been awesome.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
Hope to have you on again sometime in the future, possibly during our religion episode.
I'd love to.
Awesome.
With anger, fuming.
I take a giant dump on the existence of religion.
It exists. I just hate it.
Yeah. We'll talk about that next time. So, as always, thanks for listening, and we will catch you again next time.